Hey there, it is 2024. This is Behind the Pixel. Let's do it.
I'm shaking 24 times. Look at that. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Welcome back to 2024. My name is Will.
My name is Catherine.
And this is Behind the Pixel, the podcast. I haven't done this in a while. Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
The Open Pixel Studios
We've done this for
podcast.
a year and it's gone immediately. You take a 2-week break and it just flies out the window.
Right. It's the Open Pixel Studios podcast, the podcast where we try to bridge the knowledge gap between those who buy creative content and those who make it. I am feeling so much better since the last time we recorded. I think we were sick for 2 weeks.
Hard to say. I've been sick for months on end. It's the new year, new me. New year, sick.
new me. Speaking of new me, for those of you who cannot see me, I have a brand new hairstyle.
Look at
Maybe.
you.
I don't know. I might cut it.
You got a little Elvis-y going on. It's getting close.
I got a little Elvis. I got a little Elvis.
Yeah.
We are in Austin, Texas.
We are. We're not in Greece, as my background may dictate.
We are enjoying Texas. It's fantastic. In terms of the weather in December, it feels like fall in New England.
It does.
Am I wrong
Fall
to
is the
say
best
that?
time of the year, so can't complain there.
Yeah, and I think that there's a little bit of wind. I mean, I think it's stronger winds than we usually get, but it's rainy and like it's like a perfect time to go to work. You know what I mean?
I want to say that you're in the minority of people who think that way. To be like, oh, it's raining. I cannot wait to get to work right now.
I don't know about you guys, but I love working in the rain. It is a fantastic time for me. I don't know why. I think I you know what it is? I feed off of other people's misery when I know that they're at home and it's raining.
How nice of you.
Like, yes.
This is why you had the Slytherin house and your Hufflepuff.
All right. So today's episode is actually, it's kind of like a bonus. It's a little bit different. It's not something we've done before. We didn't write this one. There's no script.
Doing it live.
In the past, we've written scripts out just to get the right messaging across. But I think today we're going to do something a little bit different. So here's what I'd like to do.
Okay.
There was a post on LinkedIn a little while ago that had a very specific point of view. And I think I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to talk about what it is, but I just want to open up the conversation to this because I think a lot of marketers and businesses are starting to move from, companies doing business with companies directly to doing business with freelancers directly.
Sure.
And maybe skipping the agency or skipping the, going straight to studio, direct to studio. There's a lot of different avenues that you could take when you want to do work with a creative artist, a creative person. And there are some expectations that are set, I think, within the industry, artistically, sort of on the agency side, that we perhaps are not all on the same page about, because this post got a lot of negative feedback, a lot of criticism. Yeah, and
you're bringing some
just kind of want to open
right
up the
now?
floor. Controversy?
It's going to catch on. I'm starting a new thing.
That's pretty good. Instead of the metaverse, it's the controversy.
Oh, the controversy.
That's excellent.
Yeah. Oh, we'll come up with something for that later. Okay. Sidetrack. I'm noting it.
Okay, so I'm just going to read the post line by line. This is not, we do not endorse this position, but I think it's a good opener. Here we go.
Okay.
Quote, if you're a freelancer and it's our first time working together, the very worst thing you can do is have a slow response time. I'm trusting you next to blindly to deliver for a client with whom I've fostered a relationship for years.
Okay.
When you don't answer within 2 hours of me asking for an update, I get very anxious. Ideally, you'd answer within 10 minutes. Once we've worked together a few times, not so important. But when it's fresh, be extremely, in all caps, responsive. How your client feels about working with you is the most important component. End quote.
Okay. Okay.
So that's the take.
That in. Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that we wrote that take. I'm not pointing anything out. And I'm also not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong with that take. Although it got a lot of backlash from a lot of freelancers.
I wonder why.
So let's pick apart that sort of stance.
Okay.
You need to respond. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is maybe how fast or what is a good response time, do you think?
I mean, that feels like a relative question because you're also taking into account like how they're communicating with you in the first place, right? Like one thing that we do is we'll ask what our freelancers' communication preferences would be in any situation, like what their preferred style of communication is. So typically if you're like on chat, if that's your like a Discord kind of situation, that might be a different vibe than something like an email or a phone call or something scheduled in advance. Like there's too many factors there. I don't think there's a determined amount of time. I think there is an expectation of like, that you have to communicate as the team that's working with the freelancer to say, here's when we'd like, a first pass by. Is that possible? If not, when can you do it by? And if I'm just waiting to hear back, I would expect to not really hear back unless there's specific questions. So I'd expect to hear back at least, on the day of the assignment that is due. It's kind of like assigning homework or assigning a task. Like you trust the person to be able to do it. And it's on you as the person in charge of directing and delegating out that creative to also put in time and padding into your production schedule so that if something does go wrong and they don't get back to you, that you then have time to adapt and adjust. So that expectation shouldn't fall on the freelancer. It should fall on the team that's delegating out the tasks, and being mindful of like being prepared for those kinds of situations because they can happen. So no, I guess to that particular stance, I don't think I should expect to hear back within a certain time frame. Yeah.
Right. So here's my take on it. I think there's different levels of responsibility that need to be discussed, deciphered prior to the project. Setting an expectation that we need to be on call, which I think is essentially what this person is saying, is unrealistic. I think for a freelancer specifically, who I think, from a freelancer's perspective, I've been freelance, I've done freelance projects in the past, and I think my expectation is that time is mine for me to use however I'd like, and you're hiring me to do a particular job, and so I have the freedom to work whenever I feel like. I think a lot of the comments in that section were more about it's my time to delegate, and if we have a specific deadline, then I'm going to make that deadline. You're trusting me to make that deadline. Now, this person is also saying from a business standpoint, look, this is the first time we work together. Right. So I need you to comfort me. And I think that is also true. There's a level of responsibility of the freelancer. Yeah, to basically reassure the person, this new client, that this is going to be taken care of. Now, how fast you do it is a different question. I think you can set, to me, in my experience, you can set expectations and clarity, and I think bring down some of that anxiousness prior to the project starting, so that when you get to that point, you're kind of putting those things in place in the future. Right. So you're like you were talking about the project being sort of having deadlines within internal deadlines that you would like check in on and do something like that. I think it's the same on the freelancer side, that you need to put in some checks and balances before each individual maybe piece or part and say, look, this is how I work. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to give you anything until this time, and I'm going to be working until then, so don't contact me. If that's the way you work. If you're the type of person who's always on Slack and, ready at a moment's notice at any time, then that's your style of work. Mm-hmm. I think context is very important. There's also projects that are time sensitive projects, right? These are things that have to go out at a specific time. They're, they gotta be on cue, that you gotta be quick. And in those types of projects, if you know that you're getting one of those, I think you have to set that expectation that, yes, I'm going to be on call from 9 to 8 because that's when this thing is going to happen. Like if it's a timed event, I think it's okay to, again, set that expectation early.
Yeah. I mean, to basically add a little bit to the mix here, my first thought was that if someone's saying that, you need to get back within 10 minutes of time in order to ensure that you're staying on track and everything's good, that feels like perhaps a situation where either that individual or that team had gotten hurt by a freelancer in the past, which is not that uncommon. It does happen.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why we have like certain contingencies in place to be like, in the event that a freelancer has an emergency, right? Like there are very real reasons why someone might not contact you. So if they have an emergency, if they ghost you, if they, for whatever reason, if they're no longer able to work on the project, you have to have plans in place on the back end to be prepared for that. So sometimes, I understand that initial feeling of anxiety and like distrust when you're going to work with somebody for the first time. But it's also, you're putting the responsibility on yourself to allow that trust to happen. And so if you're putting boundaries and like all of these like really like strict restrictions or non-restrictions in place, I think it's just going to lead to already building distrust in the process. So there has to be a level of flexibility there.
Yeah, I think if you start a new relationship kind of saying like, I'm expecting this and those expectations are unrealistic or don't match, then you're already going to have a problem with whoever you're working with, right? Some of those comments that I saw were like, we'll never work together. And I was like, oh, well, that's an interesting way of taking it too. Mm-hmm. Like just because someone, posted something, all of a sudden, that's your stance and it's forever. This person can change their mind. They can, so.
Yeah, it's also like different. Yeah, there's different work styles. There's different work environments, right? Like we understand that like in to your point earlier, like dealing with high-paced work environments that demand that kind of time and attention for whatever reason, right? We don't have time to get into all the back-end reasons of why production schedules are tight. But all of that is to say that, if you're the type of person who is a freelancer that doesn't mind working in that type of high-paced environment, then, is it a problem? That's an open question.
I think it is. And I know that maybe it's a hot take, but I think it is because it sets the expectation for everyone else. Yeah. I think that's it's an industry problem, right? If the majority of the people in the industry just expect this to be the case, right, then it's setting the expectation that everyone's going to do that, and you coming in have to do it too. And I think that's where this person's coming
I'm
from.
with you there for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's, it's kind of, I always talk about it's on us to like make those changes, whatever those changes may be.
Yeah.
But we're about providing solutions. So can we go through maybe one or two or however many you think you have solutions to, what is it? Freelancer expectations, right?
Yeah. Right. So I think having The first thing is something that we had done in our company, which was having a we basically call it like a crisis management department, but it's essentially like having back-end plans in place for, in the event that something goes wrong, you already have a plan in place for how you're going to manage that. So we have that with, things with freelancers. We have that with clients. If a client doesn't pay, what happens? How do you handle that? Those are very real things that can happen in a business. So having those kinds of conversations in your business ahead of time is a huge benefit. And you're going to learn, and you can't predict everything, right? There's going to be times where something comes up that you don't expect. But having a back-end guideline for how to mitigate those kinds of situations is helpful.
And I think if you're just to tack on, if you're a freelancer, a solo person who's working, it might be good to bounce some ideas off of other freelancers. Chances are you're not the only person who's been in this situation. And they might have something in the contract. They might have, you can mitigate these things in different ways. Something in writing makes it a little bit more legal, a little bit more scary for the client, for your whoever you're working with, the agency, whatever, the producer. Those kinds of things might help them also, foster the right environment for you to be successful in the artwork.
I mean, it's the same idea of like if you're a freelancer and you've been hurt by a client of your, someone like us in the past, then that's you have the power to be able to help mitigate and control those situations for the future. Maybe you require a certain percentage up front because you don't want to get, screwed over in the long run. There's lots of ways to, like you're saying, legally protect yourself in those situations. That's just good to have. I think it's just a good practice to have things in place that are protective of both parties.
Yeah. And, I think everyone's trying to build long-term relationships at this point. At least that's a lot of what I've been seeing online. People trying to build long-term relationships with their clients and with their freelancers, and like fostering that relationship. So keep that in mind. I think both if you're a marketer, a producer, someone who works at an agency who's looking to work for freelancers or studios or whoever, if we're not coming at it from the standpoint of long-term, here's how we can continue to build this. That might be a red flag if it's just kind of like a one-off. Oh, I don't necessarily care about this. I just need something to tide me over until I get the real project that I want, or something like that.
Yeah.
That might be something to consider.
I'd also say maybe as a solution here, something that we've done in the past for times when we've worked with freelancers for the first time is we've been very deliberate about like giving smaller chunks of opportunity to start, to be like, okay, can you handle this amount of workload? Great. If you can, we can give you more in the future. To be able to test our communication with them, to be able to get to know them a little bit more deeply, to get to learn their style in a setting that you're creating less pressure in that way. So for the folks who might be like owners or, managers who are like, we need a freelancer on this project, you can be more strategic about how much work you're giving out at the very beginning if you have that kind of trust issue. And if you're anxious about it, right? Honestly, that's, I want to be real about it, I guess. But
it takes a certain kind of person though. Like you have to be aware that you have a trust issue.
I know I have anxiety issues. So for me, I think when we started, it was about like mitigating my anxiety as much as possible. But the idea there is, you can create a smaller start to the relationship without sacrificing the pressure of giving the freelancer so much work that you're then going to be like panicked if they don't get it done on time or whatever that might be.
Yeah, I feel like, your reputation with your clients, with your income shouldn't necessarily be entirely weighted on this one person who you are singularly working. Like if you can finagle that to be the case, that's probably the better way to go.
Yeah, and then once you build that first round of trust with them, it's a wonderful thing to be like, okay, cool, well, let's give you this, let's give you that. Like it exponentially expands from there, which is a beautiful thing. So I think,
and I mean, ghosting can always happen.
Yeah.
So so just keep those plans in place.
But yeah,
even if,
Yeah. So I like your idea of like kind of thinking about the long term, building a relationship over time. And just honestly, if you're like, it feels too like if you're really distrusting, then you need to talk to your freelancer more and get to know them more, right? Like
that's true.
One thing we've always loved doing is having like calls before we even connect with have a call with a freelancer before they even sign up for your platform or whatever it is that you might have, just to get to know them better and be like, hey, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? We love being able to match freelancers' capabilities with the things that they're interested in and passionate about, whether that's subject matter or artistic style. And I think if you work off of that model to be able to you're creating an opportunity for a freelancer to be able to do what they love to do. So in a way, you're setting up a space that is safe for them to be able to trust that they're going to want to do it because it's something they care about. So yeah, I feel like that's something maybe we don't talk about as much, is that sort of emotional component behind a project, as opposed to this feeling of that cog in the wheel of we just need you to do this task and move on. There's much more to a project than that. So I think coming at it with that lens is just I don't want to say just a better way to do it, but I think it's a solid move.
It's a better way to do it.
I encourage you to try it. Yeah.
All right, cool. So this wraps up our first episode of season 2. Welcome to 2024.
Electric Boogaloo.
New me. Do we have anything coming up? That we can talk about?
That you can get hyped about? So, we're going to be focusing some of our conversations in potentially different formats like the one you're hearing today. So we might be talking about, perhaps in a sense, more current events. We might be having some more interviews that are specifically focused on some of the work that we're passionate about and would like to get a little bit more into in the coming year. And we did mention in our newsletter, but we haven't mentioned here on the podcast, so to speak, that we're looking into planning some live events, some Q&As, so to speak. Whether we do that through a LinkedIn Live or a Zoom. I think people still call it Zoom.
I don't think we'll ever do a LinkedIn Live. Maybe we'll do
maybe
a LinkedIn
one day.
Live. Maybe not. I don't know.
But we'll try to do some group Q&As where people can ask their questions and maybe get answers. I don't know. We'll see how we're feeling that day. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. So I'm excited. I think hopefully we'll have some new folks on the podcast, some new interviews this season. We'll keep it short and sweet. But thank you so much. And until next time,
stay honest.
Stay creative.
There it is. Stay open. We'll see you next time.
See ya.